Welcome to the March Influence newsletter. And over the last month, there have been some very interesting developments in the policy world and in the business environment generally. One of the biggest has been the budget, of course, delivered on the 15th of March by Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And from an IoD perspective, we saw some positives and negatives coming out of this. We were, of course, glad to hear from the Office for Budgetary Responsibility that a recession is no longer expected this year. The OBR had been very pessimistic in its previous forecast. And we appreciated the fact that the government has been listening to our concerns about the need to boost business investment. And the introduction of 100% full expensing for the next 3 years is a welcome and a necessary step, in our opinion, particularly at a time when corporation tax is going up from 19% to 25%, and the super deduction tax incentive measure is coming to an end. And in fact, we had made the case to the Treasury back in July of last year for a 100% expensing regime. The only thing that we would say now is that the government should make this important measure a permanent feature of the tax system, not just a measure for the next 3 years, and thereby encourage long-term investment planning. I have to say, we also like the fact the government is starting to recognise the need for greater investment and greater support of childcare. Obviously, the childcare landscape needs a lot more reform to ensure that it's sustainable for the long term and supports parents back to work, which is incredibly important. But the budget measures were a start, and at least we've got some degree of focus on this important area. Now, on the negative side of the budget, we welcome the partial reversal in cuts to R&D tax credits, but by targeting research-intensive sectors, this rowback on measures doesn't really do anything to encourage a greater culture of innovation in rank-and-file businesses lying outside those target sectors. We also felt the budget didn't really address the issue of how we incentivize smaller companies to meet net zero targets, something that we have recently been asking around the question, where is the UK's version of the US Inflation Reduction Act, this huge act in the United States, which is aimed at incentivizing private sector investment in clean technologies, green business. We need a UK equivalent of that. Now, another thing that's really hit us over the last week or so has been the unexpected turmoil in the banking sector, which started off in the United States with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and several other regional US banks, and has now spread across the Atlantic, not only to affect the subsidiaries of Silicon Valley Bank, but also ultimately to bring down one of Switzerland's largest banks, Credit Suisse. Now, I suppose in these circumstances, it is tempting for us and for the financial markets to ask which bank is going to be next. I think we can reassure ourselves to some degree by remembering that banks in the UK and elsewhere are in a stronger position now than they were prior to the financial crisis. And I think also we're starting to see the bank resolution regimes that were put in place after 2008. They appear to be working okay so far. However, as someone wrote in a newspaper this week, banking is a massive, complicated and delicate confidence trick. And in a fractional banking system, the system simply can't cope if a significant proportion of depositors all want their money back at the same time. So we'll have to wait, perhaps with some degree of nerves, to see if the necessary degree of confidence has been sustained by central banks in their interventions, and we are able to avoid further contagion. Ultimately, I think we're going to ask ourselves some very tough questions about the governance of some of these failing institutions. What's happening now, rather abruptly, is the consequence of some pretty poor decision making made over an extended period of time. Now, last but absolutely not least, could I draw your attention to our latest Policy Voice survey? There's some interesting questions around ESG in this survey, which we'd really like to get your views on. And there's also our essential temperature taking of what you are feeling about the economy. So please do answer those questions. They will have come through as a general email to your inbox within the last week or so. Thank you.